So the shutdown is finally over, but if you think that's the end of the story, you're not seeing the full picture. In fact, the real questions are only just beginning to surface. After weeks of federal agencies operating almost entirely in the dark, President Trump has stepped up to the podium and officially announced his long-awaited plan to get Washington back to work. There's a palpable sense of relief, of course. But here's the critical detail that nobody seems to be talking about amidst all the noise. While Congress was completely locked in that ridiculous protracted stalemate, something crucial did keep working. Over 62 million Social Security recipients, many of whom depend on that money for their very survival, kept receiving their checks right on time. You might ask why or how that was possible. The answer is simple but vital. Social Security isn't funded the same way as most other government programs that grind to a halt. It doesn't rely on the contentious discretionary budget that causes these shutdowns in the first place. Instead, it runs on its own dedicated, protected revenue stream derived directly from the payroll taxes we all pay. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. As Trump pushes his new reopening strategy forward, there's a critical, damaging detail buried deep in the fine print that could absolutely affect your benefits and services down the line. The Social Security Administration, the SSA, was forced to furlough thousands upon thousands of its employees during the closure. This wasn't a minor hiccup. It created a massive, system-clogging backlog of disability claims, essential benefit verifications, and brand new applications. We're hearing that some field offices are already running 8 to 12 weeks behind schedule, a delay that is simply catastrophic for people in need. So, while your actual monthly payment stayed safe, thank goodness, the essential human services you depend on to manage that system took a devastating hit. The real question we should be asking isn't just whether Trump can reopen the government. It's whether the Social Security Administration can possibly recover fast enough to process your vital claims before the next inevitable budget crisis hits. Let me tell you something that might or might not surprise you. Government shutdowns have unfortunately become so common and routine in the last 2 decades that most Americans just shrug their shoulders when they hear the news. It's just political noise. But this one felt different, didn't it? When Trump walked up to that podium and announced his plan to reopen federal operations, you could almost hear this collective sigh of relief echo across the country. And yet, if you've been watching this situation closely, you know that reopening the entire federal government isn't remotely like flipping a light switch. It's far more complicated. It's more like trying to restart a massive, complex engine that's been sitting cold and abandoned for weeks. Every single gear has to engage properly. Every interdependent system has to sync up perfectly. And just one wrong move, one jammed component, can cause the whole thing to seize up again. What makes this particular situation so interesting and so precarious is the timing. Trump's announcement came right as the Social Security Administration was entering one of its absolute busiest periods of the entire year. Between January and April, millions of Americans file new claims. They try to update their personal information, and they schedule crucial appointments at their local field offices. The SSA typically staffs up during this time. They know this surge in volume is coming and they plan for it. But instead of bolstering their workforce, they've been forced to operate with skeleton crews, dealing with answering machines full of desperate messages and waiting rooms packed to the gills with people who've been trying to get simple answers for weeks on end. Just stop and think about what that really means for a human being caught in this. Think about someone who's been waiting anxiously to find out if their disability claim, their only source of income, got approved. Think about a recent widow trying to navigate a bureaucratic maze just to claim survivor benefits. Or think about a 62-year-old who just wants to understand their retirement options before making one of the biggest and most irreversible financial decisions of their entire life. Now, Trump's reopening plan certainly sounds straightforward on paper. The goal is to get Congress to pass a continuing resolution, sign it into law, and then instruct all federal agencies to resume their normal operations. Simple, right? But here's exactly where it gets complicated. The Social Security Administration isn't just dealing with a backlog of work that piled up during the shutdown period. They are also simultaneously wrestling with critical staffing shortages that existed long before this specific crisis ever started. It's a crisis on top of a crisis. Over just the past 5 years, the SSA has lost roughly 15,000 employees through retirements and natural attrition, and they haven't been able to replace most of them due to relentless hiring freezes and severe budget constraints. So, even when the government officially reopens, the very people you need to talk to, the experts who know the system, might not even be there anymore. Or, if they are, they might be so completely overwhelmed with catching up on months of delayed work that just getting an appointment could take months instead of the weeks you were counting on. Let's really talk about what actually happens inside a Social Security field office, because I think most people have absolutely no idea how complex these operations really are. When you walk in with what seems like a simple question about your benefits, you're not just talking to someone who casually looks up your information on a single computer screen. That single employee, who is now likely overworked and stressed, has to navigate a labyrinth of multiple, often archaic databases. They have to verify your identity through several different stringent security protocols, a process that cannot be skipped. They must meticulously cross-reference your earnings history, sometimes going back decades, and then make absolutely certain that every single piece of that information perfectly aligns with IRS records, with state vital statistics like birth and death certificates, and sometimes even with military service records if you're a veteran. This is not, and has never been, a quick 5-minute conversation. A typical standard appointment for something as common as filing a new retirement claim takes, at a minimum, at least an hour, and often much, much longer if there are any complications like self-employment income, pensions from jobs where you didn't pay social security taxes, or calculations for dependent benefits for a spouse or a child. During the shutdown, all of that essential, detailed work ground to a halt for anything that wasn't considered essential. And essential services meant one thing and one thing only: making sure existing beneficiaries got their monthly payments on time. Everything else, literally everything else, got pushed to the side. New applications, delayed. Appeals of denied claims, postponed. Those requests for benefit verifications that you urgently need for mortgage applications or loan refinancing, put on hold indefinitely. Questions about your Medicare enrollment, you'd have to wait. And here's the kicker. Even though Social Security kept paying benefits, and Medicare did too, the critical coordination between these two massive interconnected programs suffered terribly. Some people who should have been automatically enrolled in Medicare found themselves cast into a bureaucratic limbo, not knowing if they were covered or not. And if you've ever tried to fix a Medicare enrollment problem, you know it can be a nightmare that takes months to straighten out. Trump's plan, as announced, emphasizes getting agencies back to full operational capacity as quickly as possible. But there is a universe of difference between being open and being functional. The Social Security Administration has to do far more than just unlock the doors and turn on the computers. They have to physically sort through thousands upon thousands of pieces of mail that piled up. They have to return thousands of phone calls. They must reschedule thousands of cancelled appointments. And only then can they even start working through the flood of new requests that kept coming in even while they were technically shut down. It's exactly like being a restaurant that had to close for 3 weeks due to an emergency and then trying to serve 3 weeks worth of customers in the very first week you reopen. It's impossible. The kitchen can only cook so fast. The servers can only handle so many tables. And no matter how hard everyone works, somebody's going to be waiting a very, very long time for their meal. What concerns a lot of advocates for seniors is that this isn't just a minor inconvenience. For many, many people, these delays have real, tangible, and devastating financial consequences. Just imagine you're 65 and you were planning to file for Social Security in February because that's when you wanted your benefits to start. But because of the shutdown, you couldn't get an appointment until April. Well, Social Security generally can't backdate retirement benefits more than 6 months, and the rules about when you can get your first payment are incredibly strict. Missing your intended filing date by a month or two could mean losing out on thousands of dollars in benefits you were entitled to. Or consider someone who's been out of work due to a severe disability and has already been waiting 8 agonizing months for a decision on their claim. During the shutdown, their case file didn't move forward at all. It just sat on a desk. That's 8 months and counting, without any income, burning through whatever meager savings they might have had, possibly facing eviction or having their utilities shut off, all while waiting for a government that was closed for business to decide whether they qualify for help. The political reality here, of course, is that Trump needs this reopening to go smoothly. He needs it not just for the sake of Social Security recipients, but for his entire political agenda. When the government is shut down, it's nearly impossible to move forward on anything else. Legislative priorities get shelved. Executive orders can't be properly implemented if the agencies needed to carry them out aren't functioning. And public confidence in the government's basic ability to do its job erodes more and more every single day. Social Security is particularly visible because it touches so many millions of American families. If the reopening bogs down and people can't get their questions answered or their critical problems solved, that becomes a powerful, easy-to-understand talking point for his opponents. They'll just point to the long lines snaking out of Social Security offices, the endless wait times on phone calls, the delayed decisions on disability claims, and they'll ask whether his plan actually worked or whether it just shifted the crisis from a complete shutdown to a functional meltdown of services. There's also the deeper, more corrosive matter of trust. Every single time the government shuts down, even partially, it chips away at people's fundamental confidence that the systems they've paid into their whole working lives will actually be there when they need them. You've been paying Social Security taxes since your very first job. For most people, that's 40 years or more of steady contributions. It adds up to a significant, almost unimaginable amount of money. And while you don't get a neat statement showing your individual account balance like you do with a 401k, you have still earned those benefits through decades of hard work. When the government you've paid into can't even keep its doors open to process your paperwork, it inevitably raises deeply uncomfortable questions. Will Social Security really be there when I need it? Can I truly count on these benefits that I've planned my entire retirement around? What happens if there's another shutdown right after I finally file my claim? Trump's team is certainly aware of these concerns, which is why the reopening plan reportedly includes directives for agencies to prioritize customer service recovery. The Social Security Administration has been specifically instructed to extend its office hours where possible, increase staff availability for the overwhelmed phone lines, and fast-track the cases that were critically delayed during the shutdown. But here's the practical challenge. You simply can't tell exhausted federal employees, many of whom are just returning from a stressful, unpaid furlough, to just work longer hours and clear an impossible deficit without giving them massive additional resources or meaningful support. These are human beings, not machines. And now they're being asked to handle a workload that is, by any objective measure, completely impossible. Burnout isn't just a buzzword here, it is a real, tangible issue that will define the success or failure of this reopening. And when people are that burned out, when they are stretched that thin, inevitable mistakes happen. Claims get processed incorrectly. Critical information gets entered wrong. A Social Security number gets transposed. And then what happens? You've got an even bigger, more complex mess to clean up months down the road, creating a vicious cycle of errors and delays. There's another complex layer to this situation, and it involves the technology systems that Social Security relies on. These aren't cutting-edge modern systems. We're talking about core databases that track all our earnings and calculate benefits, and some of them are running on software that is literally decades old. It works mostly, but it's brittle, and it was never designed to handle sudden, massive surges in demand or to easily accommodate new policies. During the shutdown, all the routine essential system maintenance got postponed. Critical security updates that should have been installed simply weren't. When complex systems go without proper maintenance, they become far more vulnerable to crashes, to data corruption, and most terrifyingly, to security breaches. The absolute last thing anybody wants is for Social Security's core computer systems to have a major, catastrophic failure right in the middle of them trying to catch up from this shutdown. And yet, that is a very real risk when you're pushing old, fragile technology this hard without having had the chance to keep it properly maintained. Let's also talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention: the ripple effects of these Social Security delays on other parts of the economy. When people can't get their simple benefit verifications, they can't complete other major financial transactions. That means mortgage applications sit in limbo. Refinancing deals that could save families hundreds of dollars a month fall through. People who need to prove their income for senior housing assistance or other state-level programs can't get the basic documentation they need. Local economies, particularly in areas with large retiree populations, depend heavily on Social Security payments flowing smoothly and on people being able to access their benefits without bureaucratic nightmares. If those systems are jammed up for months following the reopening, it directly affects banks, real estate companies, healthcare providers, and countless small businesses that serve those senior communities. Trump's plan also has to address the nagging question of how to prevent this from happening all over again. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: unless something fundamentally changes about how Congress handles its budget negotiations, we are very likely to see more shutdowns in the future. Social Security recipients need more than just a temporary reopening. They need stability. They need to know that the agency charged with managing their hard-earned benefits will have consistent funding, adequate staffing, and the ability to plan beyond the next 6-month budget crisis. Some experts have suggested taking the Social Security Administration's operational funding completely out of the annual appropriations process, similar to how the benefits themselves are funded. This would give it permanent funding authority, so that even if Congress can't agree on a budget for other agencies, Social Security offices stay open and fully staffed. That's not part of Trump's current plan, but it's the kind of long-term structural reform that could actually solve the problem rather than just putting another temporary band-aid on it. There's also the critical matter of communication. Throughout the shutdown, many seniors and disabled individuals had no idea what was happening with their claims or when they could expect services to resume. The Social Security Administration's website stayed up, but it couldn't provide personalized information about individual cases. The phone lines that were supposed to be available had wait times measured in hours, not minutes, if you could even get through. And local field offices, even the ones that were technically open for emergencies, had extremely limited ability to help with anything beyond the most critical life or death situations. Now that the government reopens, there needs to be a clear, proactive communication strategy. People need to know what to expect. They need to be told, honestly, how long the backlog will take to clear and what they should do if they've been waiting for a decision or trying to get an appointment. Without that kind of clear, honest communication, the reopening just creates more confusion, anger, and frustration. One of the more technical aspects of Trump's reopening plan involves how quickly the Social Security Administration can bring back all its furloughed workers and get them up to speed. You can't just flip a switch. Even employees who are very experienced need time to figure out what happened while they were gone, what cases piled up that need immediate attention, and what new policies or emergency procedures may have changed in their absence. There's always a learning curve after any significant disruption, and the longer that disruption lasts, the steeper that curve becomes. The SSA is going to have to invest significant time in quickly retraining staff, updating them on the backlog situation, and making sure everyone understands the new priorities. That takes time and resources, both of which are in shortest supply right after a shutdown. So, can Trump's plan actually work? The honest answer is, it really depends on what you mean by work. If working simply means that Social Security checks keep arriving on time, then yes, that was never really in doubt. The payment systems themselves are robust and protected. But if working means that everyone who needs to interact with the Social Security Administration, every retiree, every disabled worker, every surviving spouse, can do so efficiently, get their questions answered promptly, have their claims processed in a reasonable time frame, and receive the level of service they deserve after paying into the system their entire working lives, then working is going to take a lot more than just reopening the doors. It's going to require sustained attention, adequate resources, and a genuine commitment to rebuilding the capacity that's been slowly eroded over years of budget battles and political dysfunction. What you really need to understand is that the government reopening is just the beginning of the recovery process. It is not the end of the problem. The real, defining test will come in the difficult weeks and months ahead, long after the news cameras have moved on, as the Social Security Administration desperately works through that massive, crushing backlog and tries to restore some semblance of normal operations. So, what does this mean for you, personally? If you've been one of the people patiently waiting for an appointment, if you've got a critical claim pending, or if you've just been trying to get basic information about your benefits, the frustrating truth is you're probably going to need to be patient for a little while longer. This is deeply frustrating, absolutely, but it's the unfortunate reality of where things stand right now. The best advice I can give you is to become your own best advocate. Keep meticulous copies of all your paperwork. Document every single call you make, who you spoke to, what time, and what they said. And please, do not hesitate to reach out to your local congressional representative's office if you're experiencing what feel like unreasonable delays or are just getting no answers. They have dedicated staff members, caseworkers, whose entire job is to help constituents just like you navigate the federal bureaucracy. And sometimes, that kind of official intervention can be the one thing that helps move your case along when you feel hopelessly stuck in bureaucratic limbo.